The morning came pale and hushed, as if the sun itself was uncertain about rising over Dust Creek. The air hung soft with the smell of horse sweat and mesquite smoke, and the boards of the bluebird groaned as a broom swept dust from their bones. Mara Ellison's hands moved in rhythm, her fingers rough from years of soap and wood ash. She'd been told once that a woman's hands were meant for holding flowers or being kissed. Hers had only ever known work. Behind her, two women whispered near the water trough. Their voices slid through the morning quiet like knives dulled by habit. "Poor thing," one said. "No beauty, no husband, not even a ribbon in her hair." The other laughed, light as straw. Mara didn't flinch. Words had long ago turned into weather. Things you endured, not answered. Still, when she glanced at the reflection in the window, dusty hair, plain dress, eyes the color of old whiskey, she felt the familiar ache bloom in her chest. Far out on the road, a rider appeared, the silhouette framed by the amber rise of sun. The sound of his horse reached her before the sight did, a slow, tired rhythm, like a heart still beating after too many losses. Elias Boone had come back to Dust Creek for the first time in years. The town looked smaller now, meaner somehow, but it was all that remained of the world his father left behind. His ranch, 12 miles west, was falling in on itself. Roof sagging, fences open, well dry. He needed help, and not many hands were willing. Inside the saloon, when he asked about hiring someone, laughter broke like glass. "You'll get no one to work out there," a man said. "Boone Ranch is cursed land." Another, red-nosed and drunk, leaned back in his chair. "Maybe get that Ellison girl. She's used to not having better offers." The room roared. Elias said nothing. He finished his drink, left a coin on the counter, and stepped into the daylight. Mara was still at the inn, wringing out a rag when his shadow crossed her path. He tipped his hat, not with the ease of a flirt, but with the weight of a man who'd buried courtesy under too much silence. "They say you're someone who knows hard work," he said. "They say a lot of things," she replied, eyes lowered. "I got a ranch needs fixin'. Roof's half gone, and I can't do it alone. I can pay some, not much." She hesitated. "You sure you want the town's pity workin' for you?" His eyes, pale as dusted steel, didn't move. "I want someone honest. Don't care what else they are." The words fell soft but heavy, and before she could think of why, she nodded. He helped her onto the wagon, and as they rode away, the town stairs trailed them like ghosts unwilling to let go. The Boone Ranch rose from the earth like a wounded creature. The house leaned against the wind. The fields had forgotten green. Yet when Mara stepped down, she smelled sage, rain, and something like possibility. Inside, the rooms were bare, just a cot, a table, a photograph of a man who looked stern enough to argue with God. Elias showed her around with few words. She noticed the small things. His hands were steady but scarred, his boots patched, his eyes watchful but kind. He left her the kitchen, muttered something about starting on the barn roof, and disappeared into the sunlight. Days folded into each other quietly. She cooked, cleaned, and helped mend what she could. In the evenings, they shared coffee in the dim glow of the fire. He asked nothing, offered little. But sometimes, when she caught him glancing her way, it wasn't with pity. It was the look of someone recognizing another survivor. One evening, she burned her hand on the kettle's handle. She hissed, dropped it, and Elias was beside her before the pain had settled. His fingers, rough and warm, wrapped around her wrist, guiding her hand into a basin of cool water. "You ought to be careful," he murmured. She looked away. "You'll find someone prettier to help you soon enough." He let out a slow breath, half a sigh, half a truth. "Pretty don't keep a roof from leaking, Miss Ellison. Honest does." For a long moment, she couldn't find her breath. The fire crackled between them. Something fragile began to stir, not romance, not yet, but the first quiet step toward trust. Outside, thunder muttered along the hills, as if even the sky agreed that change was coming. Weeks passed, and Dust Creek's whispers found their way out to the ranch. "She's living there? No ring. No shame." The words traveled faster than wind, poisoning what little peace Mara had found. When she went to town for flour, women stopped talking as she entered. Their smiles were tight, brittle. Even the preacher's sermon on Sunday turned to venom. "The devil's work often comes disguised as charity," he said, eyes grazing hers. That night, under a swollen moon, she packed her few belongings. Elias found her by the porch, clutching a shawl against the cold. "You leavin'?" "I'm tired," she said. "Tired of fightin' what people think I am." He leaned against the railing, arms folded. "Then stop lettin' 'em decide who that is." She shook her head. "You don't understand. You're a man. You get to walk away." He looked out toward the black horizon. "Maybe. But they never stopped callin' me the drunk son. No matter how much I worked, that's all they saw." He turned back to her, voice low, steady as the ground. "Let 'em talk. They're just afraid of honest things, 'cause they shine in a different way." Her eyes met his, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. That night, a storm rolled in without warning. Lightning split the sky, thunder cracking so loud it shook the windows. Elias ran out to tie down the horses, Mara following with a lantern. The wind tore at her skirts, rain whipped her face. Then, in a blinding flash, the barn roof caught fire. Flames roared, fierce and hungry. Elias shouted for water, and together they fought the blaze, passing buckets in the chaos, coughing through smoke. When the roof began to cave, he grabbed her arm, dragging her back just as the timbers fell in a shower of sparks. They stumbled into the mud, drenched and trembling, watching the barn burn. "All that work," she gasped. He looked at the ruin and shook his head. "Ain't lost, just burned. Sometimes that's the only way something new can start." Rain began to pour harder, turning flame to steam. She turned to him, soaked, her hair clinging to her face. For a long time, neither spoke. Then she whispered, barely a breath, "I'm not pretty, Elias." He didn't look away. His voice came soft, "Sure. That's fine. I need honest, not fancy." The words struck like thunder, quiet but earth-deep. Around them, the storm settled into a gentle rain, and the night held its breath. In that silence, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, pure and raw. Not a kind of love sung in ballads, but a kind that roots itself in soil and pain and small mercies. By morning, the air smelled clean again. The barn still smoldered, but the world seemed new. The sun crept slow over the ridge, turning wet earth to gold. Mara brewed coffee, while Elias began to rebuild the fence. When she brought him a tin cup, their fingers brushed, just enough to make the world stop for a second. No words were needed. The space between them spoke of all that had changed. Later, she hung new curtains in the kitchen, simple white cotton that danced in the breeze. They weren't fancy, but they were hers. The town could keep its gossip. Dust Creek's words no longer held weight. She had something truer now, dignity that couldn't be taken, and a man who saw her without needing her to shine. Elias didn't talk about love. He showed it instead, in the way he fixed her chair before she asked, or how he left a wildflower by her cup each morning. Small acts, quiet grace. The kind that built a life, not just a story. Evening came soft, with the sound of crickets and the scent of wet sage. They sat on the porch, watching the horizon fade. The world was still rough, still uncertain, but for once, it felt like home. And somewhere, in the hush between heartbeats, Mara realized that beauty was never the paint on a face or the lace on a dress. It was the courage to stay when the world told you to go. It was the strength to be kind after years of being overlooked. The wind carried a whisper across the valley, like the land itself was offering benediction. Some folks spend their whole lives chasing beauty, painted faces, polished lies, gold that fades in the sun. But there's a kind of beauty that never ages, the kind that looks you in the eye and doesn't flinch. In the quiet corners of the world, where hearts are worn but honest, love doesn't bloom loud. It grows steady, like the sound of boots on an old porch. And maybe that's all any of us need, something real enough to stay. As the lantern burned low, the two figures on the porch sat wrapped in the sound of the crickets and the low hum of the wind, the night folding around them like an old song. Out in the dark, Dust Creek kept on whispering, but for once, Mara didn't care. The only voice that mattered was the quiet one beside her, saying nothing at all and meaning everything. And when the camera of the mind pulls back, sunlight fading, house standing tall against the horizon. You can almost hear that old cowboy voice narrate, slow and certain. Out here, fancy fades fast. But honest'll keep you warm come winter. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe some hearts don't need polish to shine. This is Frontier Myths, where truth wears dust and love speaks quiet.